What's up, icons? It's the iconic fashion figure back with a new video. So this week I'm going to be talking about importing your goods or manufacturing domestically. Basically, this is information you'll want to decide before you go sourcing, so that way you're not sourcing factories that are useless to you if they don't fit your business. So I want to talk about the benefits of both and the cons of both, so that way you can decide what's best for you and put in all your time and effort searching for the right factory in the right area. So jumping right into it, which of course we all know the biggest one is pricing. Pricing is crucial to your business because, let's face it, we're all in it to make money. And if you're spending too much on the product, it's kind of hard to make a profit. Pricing is always number one when it comes to finding the right factory. Now, working in other countries and importing the goods into the U.S. may seem ideal because the pricing tends to be lower. Since we have stricter labor laws than some of the other countries, our minimum wage is higher than some of the other countries. Therefore, we may be paying more for a product here in the U.S. versus importing a product from, let's say, like China or maybe Mexico. You may pay less in those countries. And that's not always. Sometimes you'll find an item that you can manufacture domestically and it may be the same price as you're getting in another country. And you also have to calculate in shipping costs as well, because you have to ship the product in from these other countries to get it to you. That may offset the cost as far as manufacturing domestically. And then leading into another key point as far as pricing, you have to think about customs as far as duties. You may or you may not have to pay duties when shipping in your goods, and that can drive up your cost as well. So while pricing may be lower manufacturing in another country, you may get hit with a huge tax bill from customs once it actually arrives in the U.S. And to be brutally honest with you, right now, those bills are high with the president that we have right now, so make sure you go vote. Another key factor that you will want to factor into your decision is the delivery time, the turnaround, or you may hear it called the lead time. Of course, coming from another country, shipping will take longer, so that will extend your time on when you receive your goods, whereas domestic, you may be able to get it in a couple days. You'll also, not only as far as shipping, when it comes to delivery, you want to see the capacity of the factory that you are interested in working in. How much can they handle and how quickly can they turn around your orders to get it back to you. Some factories may be backed up and you will be thrown at the bottom of the list, especially if you're a new client to them. They may put their bigger clients before you, which means you'll be waiting longer to get your goods. So delivery is important. How long, how fast. You will want to look into the amount of employees that they have. How long have they been in business? Those type of things to make sure they can deliver on time, because time is money and you need your stuff on time. This video is already starting to look like it's leaning towards domestic, because the next thing is the language barrier. When you're importing from another country that speaks a different language, they may have some employees that know English, some may know very little English or no English at all. So you have to be able to communicate with those factories to make sure they're producing exactly what it is that you're looking for. Whereas here in the U.S., if you find someone that speaks English, it is a lot easier to communicate with someone domestically to make sure you get exactly what it is that you want. And speaking of communication, when you manufacture domestically, you can also meet with these factories in person. You can go to the factories to check up on their progress, to see how they're doing. Of course, you can fly to the other countries and see what's going on there and the progress, but how often will you have the time to go to those countries? Whereas you may have more time here domestically since it's closer. Or it may be right down the street from you in your very own city. Now, to go into a benefit of importing versus domestic, because it seems like I'm encouraging you guys to lean towards domestic, with importing, other countries may have different resources and different technology than we have here in the U.S. For instance, a lot of the fabrics that we use still come from China, even if the product says made in U.S. The products are still imported from China. So they may have more resources that are accessible to you versus here in the US. Same with the technology. We all know China can come up with some crazy technology that we didn't even know existed until we saw them using it, and then we may start using it here. Not to say that we don't have amazing technology, there's just some things there that you will find that we may not have, or even if we do have it, it's too expensive here. So not all the factories will have access to that technology to create the things that you want made, or to be able to make it as quickly as some of the factories in China can make it. Or again, cost. The cost may be too high because the technology is rare here in our country. So you'll want to keep that in mind when deciding to import or manufacture domestically. And I quickly just mentioned the whole Made in U.S. tag. We all know that speaks volume when it comes to product. So if you can have a product that says Made in U.S., a lot of people will tend to buy your product over others because they know that you're supporting our economy. You're creating jobs here in our country, or at least keeping someone in our country employed. Some people are willing to pay the extra money just to have a tag that says Made in the U.S. But that goes the same with, let's say, Made in Italy. Italy is known for having like the high fashion, better quality, the higher end designer products. So people will also pay top dollar to see a tag that says Made in Italy versus Made in China, Made in Mexico. So that can go both ways, Made in US or Made in Italy, import or domestic, depending on your target market. That can lean either way. And speaking of quality, this leads into the next point. Quality assurance in other countries may be different than ours. Here, our country has different standards that we have to abide by, whereas other countries, they don't have the same standards that we do. So things may slip through the cracks when importing from another country, whereas here in the US, we all have to follow the same rules. So the factories you find here already are aware of what's required from you as far as quality. Now, of course, if that factory doesn't follow those rules, you can always push it back on them. Whereas if you're importing, if you didn't tell them to do that, it wasn't in your tech pack to have a certain tag on it or to make it a certain way, especially when it comes to children's clothing, there's a lot of rules and regulations when it comes to children's clothing. If you don't tell them, let them know this, they'll ship it in the easiest way it is for them to make it and the cheapest way for them to make it, and it may not be up to your standard. It may not meet all of the US regulations that's required of us. So it doesn't mean not to import, that just means you need to make sure to be clear with those factories. So that leads back to that language barrier. You have to be able to find a way to communicate your requirements so that way it meets your quality standards. Another thing when it comes to other countries versus the US is when it comes to intellectual property. Here in the US, we have strict rules when it comes to that as far as copywriting and, stealing other people's ideas and information. Other countries may not be as strict on that. So don't be surprised if you create a whole line and then you notice in another country they completely duplicated exactly what you've done. That's when it comes to those contracts and agreements. You want something in there about the intellectual property so that way they don't steal that information. Whereas here in the US, these factories should already know that they can't do that because they're looking at a lawsuit. Other countries may not be so afraid because you may have to go to their country in order to sue them. It'll be a lot harder for you to do so. And then for the last point that I just want to bring up to you to help you decide which way you want to lean towards, import or domestic, is minimum order quantity. We all know importing from other countries, especially like China, you may have lower prices. But to get lower prices, you have to produce more. So your minimum order quantities may be higher from another country. You may also want to produce higher quantities anyway because when it comes to shipping, it lowers your shipping cost per piece when you're shipping more. Here in the US, you may be able to find factories that have a lower MOQ. the minimum order quantity. I noticed that it seems to be that you can find a factory that'll produce like 50 pieces of a style for you here in the US. It's not as easy in China, and if you do find it in China, just for example, you may pay a higher price. And then at that point, you might as well just produce domestically. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. I just wanted to throw a few tips out there to get your mind thinking before we jump into sourcing, so that way you know which way to direct your attention. If you're going to start searching domestically or start searching in other countries, you may do both just so that you can price compare or do comparisons in general. Now, this video may seem like I kind of encourage you guys to lean towards domestic, but that wasn't the intention. I actually import myself. If any of you are familiar with my brand, my product is imported from China, so trust me, I chose to import. Pricing was big for me, and no one could beat the pricing that I was getting, so importing was it. Now, of course, if I can find a way to get pricing closer to what I'm getting, I would definitely switch over to domestic, but that pricing outweighed everything else. So that's it for this week. Next week, we'll jump into the next step so that way you guys can start designing your line. Thank you for watching.